Hello Control Room, welcome to another Atmos music workshop. I'm your host Jake Fields, and thanks for everyone sending in your amazing submissions for this workshop. Ramesh has gone through and selected a couple for us to work on today. This first track is going to be the Achoress. The song is The Exchange, featuring James Dean Bradfield. It's produced and recorded by Catherine Davis and mixed by Dave Erringer. All I've done so far is literally bring in the reference, all the stems, and lined it up to the tempo and got it starting on a round number. If I start to use any synced Dolby panners, that it will sync up to the first beat and all that kind of fun stuff. So first things first, we'll have a little look at the Dolby renderer to make sure that you have everything set up the way that you would like. I've got everything imported into Pro Tools, and all my stems I've put on a new object, which is why all of these have a blue ring around them to show that there's active metadata being sent to them. That's how you can define that just by looking at the renderer. The first 10 are kind of squared out to be the bed channel, which is 7.1.2. So that includes your traditional horizontal plane of 7.1, with your subwoofer being the 0.1, and the 0.2 is your height channels, and that is actually your entire height channel array split as left and right. So 9 is your left and 10 is your right. So objects over beds, I mean, this is exactly why you would want to use objects rather than beds, because you get more spatial definition, especially in the height parameter. When you're mixing something as an object rather than as a bed. As soon as you start to increase the height parameter on anything in the bed, it will put it in all of the heights. So that way you'll get the spread behind the listener. And if you've got 6 height channels, you'll get it right in the middle of the room as well, and not just at the front. So for example, if you were using cymbals or something like that and you wanted to increase the height to make it feel like a natural drum kit, actually what you're going to be doing is spreading those cymbals behind the listener as well, kind of creating this weird kind of effect that you might not be after. So if you use it as an object instead, it will only use the speakers closest to those objects, so you'll only use the front 2 height channels. So now let's take a look at our I/O in Pro Tools. I should be just working with, I think, the Dolby Music Production template, which is available once you download the Dolby Music Panner. I'm just going to create a couple of extra buses because I know that we're going to need them. Mono LFE bus and a 7.1.2 reverb bus. We'll also make sure that we have an output dedicated for the LTC channel if you're working with the production suite. This way you can double check that you've got that configured correctly in the renderer here as well by just opening your preferences and seeing the LTC input channel is 129. So LTC is a bit of a foreign concept for a lot of music producers, I think, because it's not something we've ever had to really think about or worry about. However, it's really important for Dolby Atmos, and that's because with timecode you're able to use punch in and out points to exactly match the length of your stereo master. This way, you know, you've probably seen it already on Apple Music, where you tab in spatial audio on and off, and this means that because it's sample accurate, you get no clicks or any problems, and you're in the exact same place in the track you would have been if you were listening to Atmos. If you have an offset, then you'll have this weird kind of moment where you're tabbing spatial audio on or off and the track will skip, or it will click or not sound absolutely correct. So this way we use LTC to make sure that we can be absolutely in line with the stereo reference that was provided. And so the way you can get LTC to link your Pro Tools and the Dolby renderer is by creating either an audio or a mono track, or an aux track, sorry, and sticking our LTC generator plugin on that. So once you've got your plugin on a channel, you need to send that to the LTC output, but I know that's going to channel 129 in the renderer. Well, on Pro Tools I can check that as well in the I/O. Just go to the bottom, LTC 129, and then in our renderer we can also confirm that that is actually the LTC input channel, and so this is where it'll be looking for that audio coming into the renderer to actually give it that timecode. Okay, and we'll just check that we are all timecode latched. We make sure we've got this time button on the renderer clicked on, and then just hit play anywhere in your session, and you should see our timecode is now lined up all nicely. One final thing that I'll do just before we start, you can do this at any point, you could probably do it just before you're about to print, but actually it's kind of good to just get it all sorted before you go. So on the first beat, as I want the track to begin, if I highlight the stereo, it's going to change this to then become the on the hour, essentially. So the current time code position, set that to 1000000. Perfect. Okay, okay. And so now, when I come to do my export, I know that I can give this pre-roll and then I can punch in on the hour, and that's going to be exactly in line with the stereo. Cool. So now we can begin. Let's have a little listen to what we've been given.
When everyone's replaceable, no, you're not responsible. You're not to blame or part of the exchange. All the things I can't condone, so you found yourself alone.
And now your faith in possession is just this week's new obsession.
Cool.
There's much to...
So we just want to get the levels kind of right, and I'm assuming that the mastered stereo is going to be a lot louder than the Atmos stems that I've been provided, so normally I'm turning down the reference to match what's been given to me. And then after that, once I've done the mix, I'll kind of go through and get it to the right level for delivery and that kind of thing. So good place to start always with these kinds of things is the kind of core percussion of the track and rhythm section. So normally start with drums and percussion and bass and kind of hear what we can bring out of those sections.
So now it seems you've gone away.
Nice. Oh, you've got that nice big crash in there. So that, if it was just the nice jangly tops, I would be inclined to bring that up into the heights a bit more, but because it's got that massive clap in there, I'm not inclined to do that. So what I might do is just bring it slightly out into the room just to sort of give you that sense of width, especially in a speaker environment. On headphones, you're probably going to hear that kind of change slightly less, in all honesty, but we're not just mixing for headphones, we're mixing for everything. So here we go. Like that. That was way more than my initial intention or my initial gut reaction for how that would sound. That's really cool, actually. Excellent. Another little thing, you've got some nice like reverb on these drums, but I don't really. I'm not a massive fan of the whole quad splitting drums and getting the entire thing all the way into the back. But I do like that this has a little bit of reverb into it. So what I might do is just complement that and get it into the room a bit more by creating another new track. We'll do another aux, but we're going to do a 712 aux this time. This is going to be my reverb. And we'll do create. Excellent. And we'll stick our Stratus 3D is kind of one that I'm most familiar with. It's never served me wrong. It's a fantastic reverb. Let's hear these drums and get this reverb going. So that might literally just be it. I'm not looking to make the drums any wetter. I'm literally just trying to kind of hear the sound of, and large natural hall is pretty much exactly the kind of sound I'm looking for, to be honest. Maybe I'll even stick this on pre a second and then unsolo that. Yeah, that sounds like a pretty good, I mean that's pretty faint, but that is, that's the kind of reverb I'm hearing in the drums. Pretty spot on actually, so you just want to kind of get a bit of that spread in the room. So what I like to do is then, you've got your standard preset, but then you can come in here and you can tweak your main balance and all that stuff. And we've already got the reverb in the front from the stem that's already baked in. So we can just turn down all this front reverb. And then you've got these extra parts here that you can also, you know, kind of manipulate that and turn that all down. And then the tops is also treated completely differently. So you can even add extra height to the kind of reverb and all sorts of fun stuff here. But I'm not going to mess around with it too much because that was sounding pretty good. Cool. So I'll just drag this down. So it's only a small reverb send, it's nothing crazy. Cool. And so that's our drums pretty much there.
So now it seems she gone away.
Nice. Cool. And so just before we move on, I'll do one more thing I forgot. We'll do a little LFE send on this drums channel, just so we get the weight of that kick in there. So just send all those. Just dial it in until it feels right. LFE is one of those things where, you know, I think there's a recommendation of like -20 or something is a good place for LFE to be setting for music mixes generally. But, you know, going hard and fast by the numbers is never a good idea. It's always best to kind of like feel it in the room. I always feel like I've got too much sub when I'm mixing just on headphones and then not enough when I bring it into the room. So it's always that kind of finding that balance, and generally being in a room with an actual subwoofer is the best way to do that. Cool, so to me that feels kind of nice. As you saw, it was kind of a little bit over -20, but you know, that's what feels good. So just trust your instinct. Bass, let's hear that. A cool distorted bass sound there. Let's just give that a bit of a spread, because a lot of bass sounds aren't very stereo, and this one isn't particularly stereo. We can make most of the LCR spread and really let the bass kind of exist in the center channel a little bit to sort of separate from those drums, and you've got more bandwidth then for the low end to exist. And then I'll probably start with lead vocals. Maybe go to the beginning of the track.
Unreplaceable, no, you're not responsible.
Oh, I also like to put my solo onto XOR, because this way I can really quickly solo between the reference and the Atmos VCA and all that kind of thing. I know some people like Latch and all that stuff. I find this the quickest way to kind of navigate with Atmos, definitely. Okay, so lead vocal, let's see what we've got.
When everyone's replaceable, no, you're not responsible. You're not too.
And again, you got a nice little reverb in there. I don't know if it's going to be the same kind. It sounds like a hall as well. Again, I'm not trying to add any wetness. I'm just trying to kind of give a bit more spread on the vocal, if anything, so you kind of get a bit of a sense of it in other parts of the room. So what I normally do is just bring it in about 15 on the front there, so that you're activating the center channel a little bit. But because people are used to listening to a stereo vocal, even though it's recorded as a mono thing, if you just have that in the center channel, it's going to feel very, very mono in comparison to your stereo reference, especially on headphones. So, and that's, you know, the opposite of what we're trying to achieve here. So just a little bit, just to kind of tickle it, just so that once you're in a speaker environment, that really has a bigger sense of presence and separation.
And now your faith in possession is just this week's new obsession. There's much to gain, it's part of the exchange.
And then having two lead vocalists, that's an interesting one. I've not done a lot of tracks with two lead vocalists, if I'm totally honest, so I'm thinking about what to do with this. We could just leave it in the same position, actually, as the other lead vocal for now, and see if it can, there's a lot of other stuff going on in this track that's going to fill out the rest of the space, so I don't feel like I need to do anything particularly crazy with that. Again, we could also just give it a little cheeky reverb send, couldn't we? There we go. Let's hear both of those.
Exchange, well, the things I can't condone, so you found yourself alone.
Nice. Another tip, try to keep delays for vocals separate, because they can be phenomenal for adding kind of a sense of depth and space, especially in headphones. So it's great that this is a really good, clean vocal stem, and very well produced and everything, but yeah, keeping those delays separate at least is fantastic. Having reverb separated is actually even better, because then you can kind of have complete control over that balance. Not that you're trying to change the balance of wetness and dryness, but you can then, instead of me trying to sort of spread this sound in, not a fake way, but like with this extra reverb, what I could then do is just take the reverb that you have on the track and use like an up mixer or something like that to maintain absolute, you know, consistency between the two versions, and you get that nice spread in a way that's kind of almost arguably a bit more natural. So let's do BVs.
It's part of the exchange.
Nice airy BVs.
So now it seems you can't equate the pain.
Because it's all locked into this BV stem now, you're kind of stuck with keeping it pretty static, in all honesty. If you started to move that around the way I'd want to move those delays, it would just be nauseating for the listener. So best to just kind of play it safe when you've got it all baked in.
So now it seems you can't equate
The penalty with.
Nice, and I think these could even come a little bit further back actually. There we go.
So now it seems you can't equate the penalty with the mistake you made. You're not to blame.
So we've got a really nice vocal spread throughout the whole room now that's going to kind of really be a nice kind of sound field for the vocals to sit in. But normally I add about 10 height to my vocal channel, just to give it, again, that slight bit of separation from the main percussive elements that are going to be at the front, giving you the most energy. This way you can kind of get a real sense of clarity from all the different elements. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the synths. Okay, and what have we got in this? Okay. So I listened to all the synth parts because they're all going to be kind of doing different things, and to me it sounds like this lead synth sound is going to be more of a static thing compared to the perk and the arcade synth that sound like they've got a lot of interesting things that you could kind of do with them. So let's find a nice static position for this lead synth to sit. Nice, I like that. Actually, what I might do is turn the sides off. This way we get a quad kind of spread. There we go, we just bring that back to the center and we get an even quad spread there. So just a little tip, if you haven't got an up mixer plugin or something like that, this is a way you can kind of achieve that same kind of effect, similar effect, but just using panning, just using object panning at least. So this percussive synth element has a lot of great stereo left and right information going on in it, so we want to maintain all of that whilst also kind of expanding that out into Atmos. So the best way to do that, I find, is to get a Dolby Atmos music panner. We are going to attach this to 45 and 46. By unticking this, it means you can obviously assign the object pair, but it also means that the Pro Tools panner is now inactive, which is why when you open it, it will all be grey. This means that the renderer will be receiving active metadata now from the plugin rather than this. If you've somehow, through whatever trick, managed to get this assigned to the object pair and then turn this on, you're then going to get conflicting metadata sent to the same channel on the renderer. So there's a chance that you could get flickering in positioning, and that will obviously audibly then send objects like scattering around places and stuff. So it's not the best. You use one or the other. So on this one, I was thinking maybe we could do like an XY split. So it's getting the other one over there. We're going to turn the sequencer on. We're going to do maybe a 8-step duration, hit edit, and then what I'm going to do is just do like a little kind of slight S figure down the side. And that slight curve just kind of gives it a little bit of extra motion instead of it being just a straight line. And you kind of get a very subtle sense of that in the binaural. Oh, and we also want that to do the same thing the other way. So I could either do another squiggly line going that way if I wanted to, or we could just do this, and then that makes it go backwards and forwards on the same motion. That's great, but also the step duration now will be twice as fast because it's doing that same thing in the same step duration. So we're going to change that to 16. We get that nice smooth motion at the kind of speed that we want, and you're maintaining all of that great stereo stuff that's going on in the original stem. Getting that in the heights as well, because it's a nice kind of like plucky high sound, to me anyway. Arcade synth, this was cool, kind of some punctuation. So that one actually, I want to do something similar, but on the ground floor of that. So we'll do another Atmos music panner, tab this to 11 and 12. And instead of in the heights, I want it to do a similar thing, but on the ground floor. And I also want, when this part starts, for it to kind of come from the back. So we're going to do this way. Let's see what that's like. A slight bit of height. So that didn't do exactly what I wanted it to. So we need it on a step duration of 8. So now hopefully every time that sound comes in, it will kind of be doing this nice chime in from the back and bring it forward for the listener with the delay. So you are listening to a stereo downfold, unfortunately, in this video. So you might hear it kind of disappear and then reappear as as the delay comes in, or something to that effect. So I noticed on this track that we do have. Let's get that and bring it up here. See what these paddy synths were. Nice. So that actually, instead of keeping it static, it will maintain its presence around the room. I'll show you what I mean. So another way to achieve spread and get a bit of motion into something is to do kind of like an XY circle. Maybe even a slow one, however fast you feel is appropriate for the stem you're working on. But this way, you'll get this stereo image that's constantly rotating around the room. So you will get a spread into everything, and because you've always got the left and then the right behind you, or the right and then the, whatever, you always get this kind of sense that it's bigger than just placing a X-copied stereo stem into something. So let's bring that up, give it a bit of height. That's too fast. So we're going to turn that down. What's great about this stem actually in doing this kind of effect is that you've got certain elements that are heavier in the left and right, so you'll kind of naturally get this sort of motion as well around you of different parts within that stem, which gives the listener something to latch onto, keeps the listener engaged. That's the extra benefit of Atmos. You have all these extra ways to keep the listener engaged. Okay, so this synth was kind of like a paddy sound, if I remember rightly. stabby keys, paddy kind of sound. So we're going to maybe bring this in so it's activating the sides as well. Just to pull it into the room a little bit. Yeah, it does the same stuff all the way through, so that's fine. I also forgot this mate sample. Let's do that before we move on to the guitars as well.
These are my options. And more death.
Oh, excellent.
It's very dangerous to live in your head.
Because that's got such an interesting kind of thing already going on in the stereo, there's sort of, I mean, you could either go through the effort of trying to, you know, copy that and then pan it as an object to kind of recreate that kind of sound, but I mean, the work's already done for you, so why would you bother? I was going to put it just actually straight to the overheads output, so that it will cover, because channels 9 and 10, just to go over that again, are your complete height channels separated in left and right. So if you've got 6 overheads, that will be 3 left, 3 right. If you've got 2 overheads, left and right, etc., etc. So you'll just maintain a persistent spread throughout the entire room, which is great. In this case, I'm going to use it as an object, but we are going to put it 100% in the heights, because I don't particularly care if I don't have it behind me on a 512 setup. I just need it to kind of get that cool spread.
These are my options. And more death.
Yeah, that's great. Awesome. So we're moving on now to guitars. Excellent. So we've got a chords guitar and 2 parts that are kind of weighted left and right. So there's a couple of things we could do with that. This time you might actually want to unlink the Pro Tools panner and not have it doing the exact same thing. So this time maybe we could have, for example, this is the left heavy side guitar, so we could bring this left guitar kind of just into the room slightly here, but then the right channel we could put quite far back, like the opposite of that, so minus 75. Let's just hear that. That's cool, because I think it's actually a lot of the reverby stuff that I'm hearing on the other right channel. And so naturally this way, if I pan this other guitar in a similar fashion, this means that we'll get a lot of the kind of reverby sound of it behind us and a lot of the dry signal providing that energy and staying in the front. Move that back here. Awesome. I might even actually bring these into the room slightly more. Maybe to 66. It's a good chords. Oh, there we go. Alright, that's going to do something cool. Let's do music panner. Let's get that on 27 and 28. And we're going to keep the mirror X, and we're going to do a 16, and we're going to do a circle from the front. I'm hoping this kind of then will break out and get wider and then come round the listener and come back and do that same effect again. Hopefully by the time it gets to the back, the second chord will start, and then that second chord will have the motion forwards. Well, hey, James VS2 guitar. Actually, you know what, let's give that a little bit of height as well. Just maybe like 25. Lead guitar. But let's hear how that breaks out in the track, because I got a feeling that's going to be a funny one.
Replaceable, you can't be irresponsible.
It's just a game. We call it the exchange.
Ah, okay, actually, so what it's doing in the track, can get away with that. Could even probably get away with having it in the rears, because we've got the main guitars at the front. So yeah, let's try that. Let's try a third of the way to the back.
The ones replaceable, you can't be responsible.
It's just a game. We call it the exchange.
I like that. It's a bit less buried in the mix. I'll check it against the reference in a minute, but I like how that has a bit more room to breathe now. That's really cool. Great, so I'm pretty happy with how I have approached all of those different elements. Let's hear how they sound all together in the mix.
So now it seems you gotta quit the penalty with the mistakes you made.
Awesome. I think that's really done exactly what the purpose of, it's aided the track. It's got that like massive, breakout for when the whole track kicks in, and all of these elements giving you that great spread around the listener. I feel like it's really achieved that sense of impact. I was thinking about whether I should separate the lead vocals a little bit more, but then actually when the backing vocals come in with everything, you get that great spread, and I don't feel like I'm missing anything at all. So yeah, now it would just be a case of checking that against the stereo reference and really making sure we're happy with all the changes. Sometimes when you kind of bring things out, as I said with the guitar solo, that will kind of give you, not more volume, but it will kind of make you perceive that sound a little bit more. So you need to just kind of go in and either lower the volume a little bit, or a bit of compression, anything to kind of help tame that. Or if it's just like high frequencies are now more apparent because they're not buried in the mix in stereo, then yeah, just a bit of taming and EQ and that kind of stuff. But nothing normally crazy is needed if the stems are prepared well for you. Alrighty, so then I'd be doing all my binaural metadata stuff. I mean, depends. If I was doing a premix at home and then bringing it into the studio, I would have done a lot of that already. And what I would have done is this exact same process already, and I would have done the binaural metadata, but probably the chances are a lot of the positioning that I had done over headphones isn't exactly translating the way I would like it to in a speaker environment. So that's kind of part of the process of taking it from headphones to studio, or in this case, studio to headphones. And so now we're going to have a look at how all these decisions that we've made, how they translate in headphones, and how we can change metadata settings to really get them to fit in the binaural space how we would like them to. So we're going to start by going through and monitoring each individual part separately, and then we will change their metadata setting. Oh, well, to begin with, let's do the bed. So the bed, I've only got reverb going on in the bed, so I know for a fact that actually I could keep all of these for near, I keep these for mid, I could also put my rears and tops to far, and that kind of replicates the kind of natural distance from the listener. And basically those distances are so off is going to give you absolutely no binauralization. So there's an amount of psychoacoustic filtering and placing that sound in a virtual room. So yes, there is an amount of room sound that you're going to get from these binaural settings, and you're choosing how much of that you're actually going to allow to affect that sound. Off means it won't have any of it at all, really dry, so it's great for drums. My drums are most likely going to be set to off, and possibly even my lead vocal, depending on how those sort of high frequencies respond to it. And basically the near, mid and far settings are supposed to be representative of distance away from the listener and that kind of smudginess you get in a natural setting when something's further away from you. So near is actually supposed to be, I think, like 20 centimeters away from your head or something crazy like that, like very, very intimate, very, very close. Mid is supposed to be about 2 meters or, something like that, and then far is around 6 meters. So obviously percussive elements, all things like this, you want a really kind of like in-your-face sound for that stuff to give you the best spatial resolution, so near is probably a great setting for those elements. If it's a percussive element that doesn't actually have anything interesting going on spatially, I do find that sometimes adding that extra near, mid, far setting to it is kind of unnecessary because you're not gaining any spatial depth from that in the headphone, but you are giving it this timbral slight shift through the binauralization process. So if you're not doing anything interesting with it for a percussive element, I would just set it to off so that you've got the most clean, sharp transients that you possibly can that also kind of line up with your stereo reference as cleanly as possible as well. So we've got the binaural feed going into the record for this session, so hopefully you should be able to actually hear the differences as I'm selecting different binaural metadata settings, and you hearing is believing. Like, it's very obvious as soon as you can hear it. So I'm going to leave that to off so we get the ultimate punch and all of that good stuff. 43, 44. I'm going to leave that off because I'm also not getting a great sense of how far into the room that is, or even an amount of height with that. So I'll just leave that off so you've got the cleanest percussion available. Cymbal swells, because these are so in the tops, let's see if we're going to get how much of a height impression we're going to get from these. If we get a good height impression, then certainly leaving it on near or something could be cool. So I am actually getting a slight bit of a height sensation from that. I don't know about everyone else listening or watching this at the moment, but I am getting something from that. So I'm going to leave it on near, and it doesn't sound nasty at all, so I like that. Let's leave that like it is. Bass. This will probably be another near jobby. Or even an off, because it's just doing an LCR spread, so you're not actually in the room at all. It's not going to give you any kind of further binaural benefit other than this extra room sound, which you don't really want. So this is a great stem where you can really hear all the different positions. Bass, obviously, you kind of want up in your face and really kind of, you know, intimate with the listener. So I've got this on off at the moment. Do far to give you an extreme example. Mid. And near. So lead vocals, this is definitely an interesting one because, again, we're not actually bringing it into the room very much, or at all. We're literally creating a slight LCR spread with this, so it shouldn't really sound too different from the stereo. Again, this is another reason why you would want to have your reverbs and delays separate, because then those would be into the room and would have all this extra space, and you could apply different metadata to those reverbs and delays. Okay, so let's have a listen to this lead vocal and see what sounds best for that.
So now it seems you can't equate the penalty with the mistake you made. You're not to blame, not the part of the exchange. You're just some ball.
Actually, that is sounding a little bit wider and near to me. So I'm going to leave that on near. Usually I leave my lead vocals on off. We'll do 2930 as the other lead vocal and just hear that.
So now it seems you can't.
And that's the other point as well, is that you could have put both of these lead vocals to the same object. But as you can hear, Catherine's vocal is completely different tonality to James's, and there's all some doubling stuff and some extra things to it, so it's not just a straight down the line lead vocal. So actually you could have maybe the near won't suit James because it is a very dry kind of sound, and you'll get some of that sibilance exacerbation that I was talking about. So let's have a listen.
So now it seems you can't equate the pain. deal with the mistakes you've made. You're not to blame, not a part of the exchange. You're just some part to interchange again.
You know what, I'm going to leave that one on off. I think leaving one of them on near and one of them off, you'll get at least some kind of separation there and more differentiation when they're played all together in the mix. BVs, so these usually sounding very airy and all sorts of stuff. Let's have a listen quickly.
So now it seems you're
Ooh, they're very
gonna
direct.
quit the penalty with the mistake you make. You're not to blame, another part of the exchange. You're just someone to.
So far does initially sound too much to me, and actually mid is fitting a bit nicer. It sounds a little bit too roomy with far. Sometimes having the lead vocal on off and the backing vocals on far, you can get a tremendous sense of depth with that, and you really start, I mean, for me personally, I hear quite a bit of the binaural effects, but that really is effective for headphones. But mid, that is, if it's sounding too much, leaving it on mid, I think you'll still get that nice kind of depth and distance perceived there. So let's have a listen to these three together.
So now it seems you're gonna quit the penalty with the.
So actually, when they're all together, I prefer it with far. So there we go. I'm going to leave that on far. Lead synths, where are we at? 37, 38. Let's have a look at that quickly. So this has kind of quite a reverby sound to it already. It's not a very dry sound, so actually far, I think, gives it that extra sense of depth that will help add to the binaural experience. Let's listen to this M8 sample. I've got a prediction that this is going to be a near sound because it's very in your face. Where are we? 3940.
These are my options. And more death. It's very dangerous to live in your head.
So far definitely makes it sound more spatial. However, I don't think it's going to be very true to the stereo if you add that amount of kind of room sound to it. So I'm going to leave it on near because I think you still get a cool sense of the height with that, but you also... Well, actually, let's test. So you get near.
These are my options. And more death.
And off. So to me, that is actually quite a dramatic difference there in the height. I really do perceive that on near, that is above.
These are my options.
Versus off.
These are my options.
It sits in my ear level. In near, it really does, to me anyway, feel like it's above my head. The height of it is more. It doesn't feel like real life, like above my head, but it does feel there's a sense of elevation to it. And I want to maintain that through the mix, so we're going to keep that on near. 45, 46, Perk synth. Let's listen to this. Okay, so because it's quite a plucky synth, I think keeping that near on it again, you really maintain the sort of transient of the synth pluck. So we're going to keep that on near. This arcade synth. So with that sound again, from mid to near, I can really feel that the transient of the sound is much more present in near than it is in mid, whereas in mid it feels a little bit, maybe a bit more spatial, but kind of, not spatial, but distant. And which is exactly what it's supposed to be trying to do, right? It's going to sort of diffuse and merge the sound as if it was further away. So I'm going to keep that on near. I like that on near. Paddy synths. This, I reckon, is going to be a mid or a far. 41, 42. So I like that on far. I think you've got that sort of lead type-ish sound sort of come in towards the end of that, but it doesn't sound too diffuse in far. So I'm going to leave that on far as it sort of feels like it suits it the best. I'll go to synth. 21, 22. I'm going to leave that one on mid because I don't feel like I gain any sense of intimacy or closeness with the near setting, and far feels like it's adding too much room sound. So mid is the right choice for that one. Piano. And so because that's got a bit of room sound in it already, far feels like it is too diffuse and is not going to be impactful enough when it comes in. But near feels, I don't know. Yeah, I don't really feel like you're missing a lot of the attack adding the extra mid instead of off or near, and you do probably maintain a bit more of that sort of sense of the room spread as it coming into the room and stuff, so let's keep that as it is. These two guitars are going to be set as the same settings, I would imagine, just because they're together. But also, because you've got mostly the kind of dry signal in one channel and then kind of a reverby one in another, these aren't linked. So we can set different ones for each left and right of that stem. So 17 and 18, for example. This way we've got a nice kind of dry sound really close to the listener for the main element of the guitar, and this reverb is giving you the extra distance with the far setting. So we're going to do that the same for the James main guitar as well, 31 and 32. So 31 will be near and this one will be far. And then chords guitar. So I don't know about you, but I am actually feeling a lot more of that sense of front to back with the near than I am with the mid. It feels a lot closer to the listener, and I feel like I can perceive that around me a lot more than it was on near, on mid, sorry. Yeah, absolutely, that's great. Okay, we're going to leave that on near. James lead guitar, 35, 36. So there you go, that is the trade-off right there between far and it sounding quite spatial, and off and it's sounding very intimate and dry. And it's sort of, let's hear this in with the mix for this part.
So if I sabotaged your calm, I didn't mean to do no harm.
Yeah, I feel like it gets a little bit lost with far, so we'll keep it on near, and we'll also check against the reference. Oh, one other thing, whilst you're doing this, because your stereo guide is most likely going to be panned in the front of the bed, or you've either just got it on bed stereo like this, I would actually kind of leave these to off whilst you're still doing this process. And then maybe if you feel like you want to put that back to near for your reverb, that's absolutely fine at the end, but this way you'll actually be monitoring the true stereo instead of the stereo with near set on it, basically. So it's going to sound like you need to do a little bit of extra steps with this mix to get it absolutely bang on with the stereo guide, maybe a little bit of compression and some other little bits and bobs to just bring it up. I'm probably not going to go through that on this video today. This is kind of more just on the Atmos workflow of things. If we had a bit more time, then I'd probably go through all of that as well. But it's really just to match exactly kind of what you're hearing in terms of, you know, that drum kick, that punch, all of that stuff. You're trying to replicate that, but expand it and give it more depth. That's the one. So yeah, then you'd be kind of going through and really fine-tuning your mix and getting it absolutely spot on for your stereo guide. I think spatially you kind of got everything sitting how you'd want it to. It's just kind of really refining those sonics and making them match up to the stereo. We're done with this now. There's one other little thing that's a bit different from this track than how you would kind of want something delivered to you. And that is the fact that this reference has this extra little thing on the end, and not in the stems that we were given. So, you know, that means that I can't give you a deliverable file that's going to be kind of, you know, the actual thing that you would send away, because this is different. But, you know, you have this version, basically. So we're in here now. We're going to go, we've got all our binaural metadata settings. We're happy with our mix. We're going to go through and check the loudness, because that's a very important part of delivering Atmos correctly. The deliverable target for an Atmos file is -18 LUFS integrated loudness. So this means you will need to listen to the entire track all the way through. It's important to note, I guess, that you can submit things that are quieter than -18. They will play back exactly how you hear them in the renderer, but there is a punishment in the kind of encoding process and distribution process, normalization process, basically on the Apple side and other services as well, that if you exceed -18, that it'll actually squash it and kind of make it quieter compared to other things on the service. So -18 is your absolute maximum. Don't exceed that, but you can, like if you're working on classical music or if you're working on something that is very dynamic, getting it as an integrated -19 or 20, for example, isn't the end of the world. If you're really, like, the loud bits are, you know, really loud and they're already really pushed, don't feel like you have to get everything to -18. It's just the kind of, that's the absolute limit that you should not exceed. So we're going to have a listen through, play this track and see what integrated loudness we've got, and then I'll take you through the printing process. As you may have also noticed, I put a little bit of a gap at the beginning of my track here. And that is because with timecode and things like this, they take a little second to link up and sync in together. So if you start printing from the very beginning of your track, there's a high chance that you're going to lose the first few milliseconds of your song. And if there's notes there or a transient or something like that, then that's going to be very noticeable. If you've got a bit of silence at the beginning of your track, that might not necessarily be super noticeable, but at the same time, it's going to not punch in exactly when you press play. It will take a couple of milliseconds, and then if you punch out at the end of your track, that means it will actually not be completely sample by sample the same length of as your stereo reference. So now we've got our track mixed, where it's at the appropriate level to be printed, we're going to go through and do that printing process. So in the Atmos renderer, you'll now create a new master file. You'll choose where you want it to live in your directory. And there are some naming conventions. It kind of depends on if you're doing label work or if you're working on an album or all those kinds of things. But as this is just a single, I'll kind of go through how I would do it for a single. So artist first, _exchange, song title, _Atmos, your initials as a mixer, it's JF. And then typically it's the location where it's been mixed at, so that if someone like again, label people kind of get hold of these files for approvals or whatever, or if artists have questions around who did what, they can see clearly, oh, this was, you know, Jake and he was working at Scrub, and this is who did this mix. Cool, so now we can go create. Oh yes, there's one other thing I forgot to do in the binaural settings. You'll see all of these yellow things. These are inactive objects, and in your input configuration, you can either do this on the window here, or window input configuration, or you'll see it also in your Pro Tools session. Every single object that does not have any assigned panner to it will have this little yellow box around it. So you just grab all of those. I know it's from 49 onwards, so we grab all of these, hit object, hit none, and then hit accept. And now when we go back to the renderer, these are all turned off. So this just, saves file space and all that kind of thing, makes the delivery more efficient, basically. Open this up. We can now hit this on to record. You can reset your loudness just to double check that you've not done anything silly. Make sure you've got your VCA soloed. Highlight the entire region that you would like to print. So normally I would just select the stereo reference, but because the stereo reference is longer than the stems we've got, I'm just going to select the stems we've got. And then I'm going to also take it to the beginning of the session. And we're chasing timecode, we're all record enabled, we're all ready to go. So now we just hit play. And then on the hour, our track will kick in, and away we go.
No, you're not responsible.
And you'll see the renderer stopped recording at exactly the end of the track. So now we have our final Printmaster with a nice little bit of pre-roll. So we can go in, and if you, for example, wanted to send this, what you've been working on, to a friend or to the artist for approvals or anything like that, and they haven't got an Atmos rig or anything like that, they only have a pair of headphones and maybe not even, an iPhone or something like that, so they have to listen to the re-render. And we can do that very easily by just selecting which one we want. I don't have a binaural re-render set up in here at the moment, so what we'll do is we'll set that up. If we go to re-renders, we have all of these ones, and so this will give you an interleaved WAV, or a choice of, you can have it as an interleaved WAV or as separate audio files, but of each one of these channels. So layout, we want bin. You've got a couple of other things here, by the way. Ambics, if you were going to do some kind of like Facebooky kind of 360 video stuff, that could be useful for that, and other bits and bobs. So you've got all sorts of options here. Okay, so we've got our bin re-render in an offline mode. Hit accept. File, export audio re-renders. We don't want the 7.1, don't want the 5.1, or the stereo, or the 9.16. We just want this bin at the bottom, the binaural. We want a multi-channel interleaved. We want to set it manually, and we want to have it to start on the hour. Export. Nice. And there is no difference, by the way, from what you hear in this version of the renderer and what you've just put out as a re-render. The reason why we don't encourage people to just do binaural re-renders and then upload them to whatever service they like is because that will be locked in as only a stereo WAV. It won't be the dynamic format of Atmos in a sense. If you access that on Apple Music on your home, for example, it will just play you a binaural stereo file out of your speakers. So that's why we don't encourage people to do that. If you send an ADM and you get it encoded and ingested into a service properly, any device that a listener wants to listen to that Atmos music on will automatically be optimized for that device, for headphones, for speaker playback, for whatever situation you're in. So, but this is a really useful tool just to kind of get it across to artists and other people that want to hear what you've been doing that might not have either DAPs installed to sort of load up a master or for whatever reason. And so you're going to do a similar punch-in for the ADM, which is the file you would send to your distribution partner or to your label for them to worry about that stuff. Again, punch in on the hour. You don't have to punch in on the hour, it's just that it's a nice round number. It can be anything. So if you know that your track starts on 59:47.30, that's fine. just make sure you're punching in at the correct time. I always tend to set it as an hour as just a bit of it's a hangover from post workflow, but also just a nice round number, and you always know that something's going to start on the hour that way. Okay, and then also MP4. If you want to hear how it's going to be, you know, heard on AirPods and on iPhones and that kind of thing, then you can set this up in the same way. So you just hit music instead of film, and again, setting manually, in on the hour, export. This one takes a little longer than the other ones because it's actually encoding and you're taking it from a lossless format into a lossy format of DD plus JOC, which is the common codec used to deliver any speaker-based playback, basically, that's not on a Blu-ray. So any streaming service and broadcasters even, Sky, etc., Netflix, Disney, they all of the audio that's done through all of those movies and sporting events and everything, it's all transmitted through DD+. And that is also how the music experience is delivered on Tidal and Amazon and Apple Music. So here you can see the ADM file is 1.5 gigabytes big. That's lossless Atmos. That's exactly what you'd kind of expect with how many streams of 48K audio? So there's 48 streams of 48K audio for 3 minutes and something seconds. So that seems to make sense. The re-render, the binaural re-render, is only 62 megabytes because it is only a stereo WAV. And the MP4 is even smaller than that because, again, it is a lossy codec that's using DD plus JOC. And that is your final deliverables for an Atmos mix. Okay, control room, so that has been the second Atmos workshop, workflow workshop that I've done with you here at Scrub HHB. Hopefully this has been really helpful for you and you can now see all of the you know, different techniques we've used and how to get files to your clients and deliverables to your labels and distributors. Thanks for watching, and I hope this has been helpful for anyone starting out their journey in Dolby Atmos mixing.